Hi guys, I'm Dan, this is Kai. We are the directors at Crescent Mortgages. Now today we're going to be talking you through how to get your mortgage fully approved. As you can imagine, to buy a property, getting your mortgage agreed is a really important part of the process. If the application is rejected, then unfortunately it could really impact your ability to buy a property. So today's video is going to explain how to get your mortgage agreed and make sure you're in the best possible position to get started with the process. Also make sure you stay tuned until the end because we're going to be adding a really important bonus tip which could really help you throughout the process. So stay tuned. Okay guys, so before we jump into it, just to remind you that we are not YouTubers. Although we are technically now, aren't we? But we're not. We are predominantly mortgage brokers. So we are here to give you kind of free, accessible online content. But if you do need specific advice or you need assistance with your mortgage, you can contact us directly. You can give us a call, send us an email, just head over to the website. There should be a link appearing on the screen now. Just send us an inquiry and we will come back to you. Just to be really clear, there are other parts of the buying process which we've touched on in other videos. So you will obviously need to go through the process of preparing to kind of confirm that you can get a mortgage and looking for a property and that kind of stuff before you actually start the mortgage process. We've covered that in other videos, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
There's been a few videos. The Mortgages Explained video, which gives you a really detailed overview of the entire process from the second you decide you want to start looking for properties. Again, the link should be popping up on the screen now. If you want to look at that, it's a bit of a longer video, isn't it? So if you've got 25 minutes free, feel free to check it out. Yeah. This video today is going to be specifically looking at the mortgage process and how to get the mortgage approved, so how the lenders assess it to agree the mortgage, which obviously everyone needs to be prepared for. Yeah. As we've touched on, if your mortgage is declined, unfortunately, for any part of the process, which we're going to talk you through, that lender is saying, we're not going to give you a mortgage. And yes, maybe there are backup options, but it depends on the specifics. Sometimes there might not be backup options and it could really impact your ability to buy a property. For some people, the mortgage is declined and unfortunately they've got to pull out of the property search, haven't they? Or the property purchase, sorry. Yeah. To get the mortgage approved, it's actually really straightforward. It's quite a straightforward video, isn't it? In terms of kind of structuring it. So there are how many parts to the mortgage assessment?
Straight under.
How many subcategories?
You have 3 stages that you like to go through, don't you?
So that's from the point that you submit the mortgage application, which you'll do once you found a property.
So you've had your offer accepted.
Yeah, so you found a property, you've made an offer, it's been accepted. That's when you start the mortgage process. So from submitting the mortgage application to getting the mortgage fully approved, there are 3 hurdles that you need to jump.
Not stages.
3 hurdles. The 3 things that the mortgage lender has to approve before they fully agree your mortgage and issue your mortgage offer. Now, we say in no particular order, but actually this first point always comes first, doesn't it? So this pretty much is when we submit the mortgage application to the lender, their system does this straight away. Why don't you tell them what it is?
I'll tell them. The credit check. A lot of people seem nervous at this stage, and this is the computer deciding if it likes you. So this isn't as black and white as some of the other bits in the process, because you are trying to get through system algorithms, you're trying to make sure that...
Or you could argue it's more black and white.
Well, maybe, but not to understand.
Be specific.
Not to understand that. So this is when you're applying to the lender and their system will do some basic criteria checks, which we will have hopefully been able to do, for example, if we're processing the mortgage for you. But the credit check is then looking at your credit history, debts you've got outstanding, if you paid them on time, if you've not, and it's going to make a decision on if it thinks your credit profile and overall profile is something they're happy to accept. Yeah.
So each lender is different, but the system will basically build an internal credit score for you, and the system will say, yes, this is enough, you pass the credit check and you can submit the application, or no, you do not pass and the application is rejected. There are a few kind of alternative options, such as you do pass, but you might need a bigger deposit, for example, because the credit checks are stricter the smaller the deposit and they get more relaxed kind of the bigger you put down. But that is the first hurdle, isn't it?
It is.
As we've explained before, if the credit check fails, there's not really any way around it, is there? Yeah. The odd lender has an appeals process, but they're often not successful, and often there is a reason why you failed the credit check. So generally, if you fail a lender's credit check, that is the end of the road.
Yeah.
If you pass the lender's credit check, then the system will allow you to allow us, if we're submitting the application for you, to fully submit the application, and that's where the mortgage interest rate that we've applied for is locked in, and the mortgage assessment and process is then underway.
Yeah.
Anything else on the credit check? Are you happy with that for now?
No, I think that's the biggest one for me of these three, because that's the one that you're never sure until you get through the system.
It's not,
for me,
and we're allowed our own opinions, aren't we?
Opinions.
In terms of preparing for the credit check, because I guess that's the main reason why you're kind of watching this video. So first of all, if you have any question marks about your credit report, so if you think you've ever had a potential credit issue, or you had a dispute with a mobile phone company, or there was ever identity fraud, or you missed some utility payments, or even anything more severe, you had a default, a CCJ, bankruptcy, if there's any question marks, we would always advise that you obtain your credit report. If you're dealing with a broker to assist with your mortgage application, you can send them the credit report and they can have a look through to basically work out if there are likely to be any problems. You can never guarantee whether you will or won't pass a lender's credit check, but you can work out, you can see what you're working with before we kind of decide which way we're going to go with the mortgage application. We work with a company called Check My File, who pull through multiple kind of credit reports from different agencies. So if you do want to kind of access that, you get a free trial if you've never used them before. There is a link in the description, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
It's not mandatory to check your credit report, but like I say, if there are any question marks, it's never a bad idea. There are a few other tips we could give, but they're a bit flimsy, aren't they? Get a credit check, build your score. On the whole, if you're about to apply for a mortgage, there's very little you can do quickly to improve your credit, isn't there?
I guess things you could do to not damage your credit is maybe if you need to take out new credit, maybe talk to a mortgage broker or someone about it first. If you're about to take out lots of debt, that can have a negative impact if you're just about to take it out. So if you're going to go and buy a car, get a credit card.
Whenever you apply for any credit card, even a current account, car, anything like the mobile phone, they will run a credit check and that will show in your credit file. Too many of those can dip your credit score. So Kai's right, maybe try and avoid too many credit checks before the mortgage application. But any questions about your credit, run it past the broker at the start of the process and they can always look at your credit report. We dragged that one out a little bit, didn't we?
I think the next one's quite short.
You're right. You're right, actually. So we can kind of make up some time.
You give them the second hurdle.
Okay, so the second and third parts, as we said, there's no particular order. They will often kind of happen simultaneously. But number 2 is the mortgage valuation. So this again is another mandatory part of the mortgage process. The lender will not give you a mortgage until they've done some form of valuation on the property that you're buying. The mortgage valuation is just a basic valuation. It's organised by the lender, so you don't really need to worry about it yourself. The lender will instruct a valuer who will either go and physically have a quick look at the property, in which case they'll contact the estate agent to book a viewing. It's not a really detailed assessment, is it? It's just kind of a quick look just to make sure that there's no obvious issues, and primarily to make sure that they think you're paying a fair price for the property. If they think it's worth less than what you're paying, that can have a detrimental impact on your mortgage application. It's called a down valuation. That's the first option, is a physical valuation. Or the second that they might go for, and we have no control over this, the lender will choose, is a kind of a desktop valuation where they won't actually have a look at the property, but they will just have a look online. They'll look at kind of information in the area, market growth based on the current prices and how much it was last sold for. And they'll give kind of a yes or a no based on that. So they haven't physically looked at the property, but they've got enough information that they're fairly comfortable with you buying the property. That's the mortgage valuation. That's the mandatory part of the mortgage process. Like I say, the lender will organise that, so you probably don't need to have any kind of involvement. Does get confused though, doesn't it, with other types of valuation or other types of survey. So we'll touch on this really quickly, but you can organise your own private survey, but that is not part of the mortgage process, is it? That's your decision, and we're going to come to that in the bonus tip at the end of the video, because it is quite important. If you are going to do your own survey, which a lot of people do, you need to make sure you do it correctly and at the right time, so we will come back to that. Anything else on valuation?
No, I think the only bit I would probably add in slightly is when you are making your offer, your estate agent or the estate agent will want various things done. The valuation is often one of those things that they're really hot on wanting it done really quickly.
It's something tangible that they can see the process.
It's like a little milestone checker for them, isn't it? It does get done quite quickly, generally after the application's in with most lenders these days. So if your agent's chasing you for it, once your mortgage application's in, you should find that that's following pretty shortly after, and then they'll leave you alone for a little bit. There
are a few exceptions. Some cases the lenders want to get the case signed off before they instruct the valuation, but you're right, these days a lot of high street lenders will instruct the valuation pretty quickly, and then it's just however quickly the valuer can book that in with the estate agent. That's number 2. The third hurdle is the underwriting. What does that mean?
It's the human.
It's a human. It's not a robot, it's a human.
Generally, yeah, always.
Normally, yeah, most lenders is a human, isn't it? Yeah. So the underwriting it's not just the system assessing your application and signing it off. It's a human, a person who works at the lender, the bank or building society, your application will land on their desk. They're going to look at all your information. They're going to look at your income. They're going to look at their criteria, and they're going to make sure that everything kind of fits within their kind of profile and their assessment, and that they are happy to sign off that mortgage for you on that property.
Yep.
This is the concern sometimes we have, is that if you speak to your bank directly before you start looking for properties and you get the certificate and you start looking for properties, yes, the bank has agreed it based on their kind of credit check, but the human hasn't done the underwriting on the assessment. Whereas if you deal with a broker, we will essentially kind of look at the case to be confident that it's going to get through underwriting.
Yeah.
When you go through underwriting, sometimes if they're happy with the application, they can just sign it off straight away. But if they have questions, they can come back. There's nothing to be concerned about. If they just want a bit more information about your situation, if they ask for more documents, so just to be clear, the underwriter is going to look at their documents, aren't they? So we'll send pay slips, bank statements, proof of deposit, that kind of stuff. The underwriter is going to look at all of that to make sure that kind of everything stacks up with what you've told them, to make sure that, again, they're comfortable that everything looks good. Once that's approved, so the credit check has obviously been accepted at the start of the process. The valuation has been signed off by the valuer and passed back to the lender to confirm that they're happy. And the underwriter has looked at your documents, looked at the case, and confirmed that they're kind of happy with the case. Then what happens?
Well, then you get the mortgage offer, which is the exciting bit, isn't it? I guess.
So the mortgage offer basically means mortgage is fully approved.
The bank is done, or building site, and the lender's done with what they need to check.
Yeah, they'll issue the offer. That will normally be valid for around 6 months, and then the mortgage just kind of sits there dormant in the background until your solicitor does all of the legal work and oversees the rest of the purchase, which can take several months. And then once the legal work is done, you get the keys and you move into the house or flat. So I guess one thing we didn't touch on in terms of kind of clients putting themselves in the strongest position. So with the valuation, there's not really much you can do, is there? To get the valuation signed off, it's done by the lender. They'll have a look at the property that you're buying, and they'll basically say, yes, we're happy with it, or no, we're not. So there's not really anything you can do. The only thing you can do is try and look at properties that are maybe more likely to be accepted. So if you're just buying a standard build house, generally you're going to be okay. Obviously not always, but generally there are less things that can go wrong. If you're buying kind of a non-standard construction, obviously some lenders can have concerns with that. Properties with kind of outbuildings that could be let out, that can be a challenge. If you buy a flat, flats are fine, but there are more areas where you can trip up. You know, high-rise blocks of flats, if there's a short lease, if there's commercial premises in the building, there's a few more areas where you can kind of trip up with a flat. But otherwise, it is just down to the valuer's comments. There's not a huge amount. And with the underwriting, anything kind of in particular that they can do to improve? I guess it's just having your documents ready.
If you're an employed person, you know, you've been in your job for a while, it's pretty easy normally. You know, 3 months pay slips is probably the most that lenders generally ask for. 3 months bank statements. If there are transactions in there that, you know, are particularly large, either in or out, as long as there's an explanation, most lenders don't mind.
Yeah, that's a bit of a misconception, isn't it? People are terrified that the lender's going to be picking apart your bank statements and asking why you spent £100 in a nightclub or why you spent 20 quid on Bet365. Within reason, they're not too worried about that kind of stuff, are they?
No, and again, your broker generally will have a look through them first before the underwriter sees them to check if there's a concern there and ask you before it gets too far. But there's not really too much. I think if you're self-employed, it's a bit different, and that's maybe a longer topic to have, and I'm sure we've got a few videos on that somewhere in the catalogue of videos that will talk about that in more detail. But generally speaking, have your documents ready, make sure your driving license is maybe registered to your current address if you haven't lived there that long.
In case they need ID and address verification.
It might do, but...
So I guess to summarise, in terms of kind of preparing for a mortgage application, it's not so much looking at the positives, it's more the potential kind of hurdles and the potential issues that might come up. So again, if you think there are potential kind of credit problems, get your credit report, send it to your broker, they can have a little look to make sure there's no potential issues going to come up then. Valuation, not a huge amount you can do, but there are certain properties that are higher risk and that some lenders maybe are a bit less kind of keen to lend on. And underwriting, if you've got kind of a fairly straightforward circumstances, you know, you're fully employed, you've been in your job for a while, that should be fairly straightforward. If there's anything a bit more quirky, or like I said, if you're self-employed, you maybe want to run the case past a mortgage broker so they can kind of have a look at the details and make sure that it is going to pass the lender's assessment.
I don't think there's timing, how long it all takes.
Just because bear in mind,
Just that bit.
yeah,
Just that bit.
So the
Just
mortgage
the mortgage.
application to get in the mortgage offer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you can get anywhere, if you're really lucky, sometimes it's all wrapped up in a week, which is quite rare, but that's about as quick as it happens. Average is probably, what, 3 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, so I'd say somewhere between, best case scenario, like you say, under a week does happen, but it's, don't hold your breath for that. We'd expect most mortgage applications to be agreed within 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Occasionally, not if there's a few hiccups or questions, but on the whole, somewhere around that. But just to be really clear, the entire process from finding the house to getting the keys, on average 4 months, but can be less, can be more, depending on the finer details. Bonus tip, so this is really important. So as we've touched on, the lender will do a basic mortgage valuation. That's not really for your benefit, that's just to get the mortgage approved, that's to kind of satisfy the lender's requirements. Now, some people like to kind of organise a more comprehensive survey on the property because you're buying this property, it's going to be your problem. If there are structural problems, any other problems, once you become the owner, if there is a problem, that's your problem. So, not problems. So some people, this isn't mandatory, but some people choose to have a survey done on the property to just have it looked at in more detail. Obviously, it does come as a cost to you, so you need to kind of confirm if you're comfortable with that. And the prices do vary, depending on the value of the property, the type of property, how comprehensive the survey is. It could be £500, it could be £1,000, it could be more, depending on. So again, you can shop around in your area for a surveyor. The important piece of advice is some people go very early and organise the survey as soon as they find the property. Now, there's a problem with that, isn't there?
Big problem. We've obviously went through the hurdles a second ago. If you've gone and had your private survey before you've even started your mortgage process and then you fail the credit check, you've lost that money. And could easily be £1,000 for a private survey, that's not unusual. If you fail the credit check and there is something on that credit file that's a big problem and we can't get around it, you're not getting that money back, for starters. And that's obviously, you failed one hurdle. There's still 2 more, as we explained, to get through. So there's 3 shots there you could fail. Also with the lender, they're doing their own basic survey, which is basic, it's very simplistic. But when they do that, let them do that first. They might notice if there's a glaring issue for you, which saves you some money. If they notice it's, the roof's got a huge issue all of a sudden, then that might save you the £1,000. It at least gives you a chance to let someone else have a quick look at it before you commit too early.
Yeah, so so the actual piece of advice is don't pay for and organise your private survey until the mortgage is fully agreed and you have the mortgage offer. You don't have to do it that way, but that's our advice. If you go and pay £1,000 for a survey before the mortgage is approved, that could be money down the drain if the mortgage is ultimately declined. And given that mortgage applications are normally agreed fairly quickly these days, you're not particularly delaying the process by holding off for 2-3 weeks until the mortgage is approved before you organise that survey. It's really important. We've seen clients before lose, again, £500, £1,000 more because they just paid for the survey way too early and then ultimately the mortgage didn't go ahead. We hope that's really helpful. I think that covers everything today. Like I say, there are other videos giving more information on the other parts of the process, but that's just how to get your mortgage approved and how to kind of prepare for it as best you can. Thanks for listening and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.